Hello Flight Simmers, Weeper here, and I am the Viper Simmer. Ever since I started my Instagram and Facebook page in regards to my cockpit, I get lots of questions from guys who don't normally follow my progress build on Viper pits and Flying Falcon. Pretty much all the details about the cockpit. So at the request of them, I thought it'd be a great idea to do a complete video detailing the entire build. So rather than doing one long video, I'm going to break it into 7 parts.
Right time. Okay, knock it off.
Little background about me. I've been flying Falcon since, what was it? Falcon on my Amiga 500, back in 1986. And, I think that pretty much got me pretty set on flying simulation. I guess you can say it got really serious when Falcon 3.0 came out. That's when I started flying sims regularly and kind of put a lot of effort into trying to simulate and fly like a real pilot. Falcon 4 came out in '98. I started a squadron back in 1997 called the 469th Mad Hatters, and somehow, next thing I know, we got invited to be the online beta test squadron. So we started beta testing for Micropros in 1997 and until the release in 1998. Ever since then, I've been a hardcore Falcon 4.0. Pretty much played just about every version. Wasn't big on the Free Falcons, or even though I purchased the Allied Force, it was really great. What was it, 10 years later, to go and see Falcon on the shelf again. So of course I bought it, but I've pretty much always been with BMS since the beginning, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just, much as I enjoy DCS and the graphics, I always seem to find myself going right back to BMS. I think so this cockpit build right now is probably my fourth generation. My first one was in, what year was that? I think it was about 96 or 90, no, it would have been after 97. I think it was in the late 90s, probably about 98 or something like that. Just after Falcon 4, I built this, this wood chair with armrests and put my Thrustmaster F16 FLCS and TQS on it, and bang, that was kind of my first simulator. Shortly after that, a couple years later, I came across a fellow on the internet who basically built a 1-to-1 scale version of that 1/12 SC model. I don't know how you pronounce that, ESCI, but that 1/12 scale F16 cockpit. And he kind of built this 1-to-1 scale out of it, and he had the plans for sale. So I bought those plans on the internet, built that up. It was pretty decent looking, I guess. Bought a bunch of panels through a company. I think they're called AGT at the time. Back in those days, it was pretty much high fidelity, I guess. Just some acrylic panels with some engraving, and you threw some cheap switches in there, and away you went. But unfortunately, I don't remember why, but I never got around to finishing it. I had it built, painted, put all the panels in, set it up, looked pretty impressive for the time, but never got around to wiring it up. And I honestly cannot think for the life of me why. I think I might have had to move or something, or had a change in careers or something, and just kind of put it aside. And ended up giving that to a buddy, and I don't know what he did with it. Probably went in the garbage for all I know. Then in the early 2000s, probably 2003, I came across viperpits.org and saw a lot of the projects these guys were doing. And so I built myself something I'm still pretty proud of today, because as guys described it, I carved it out of 2x4s, but built something that at the time I thought was pretty close and accurate. And built that up, had it all completely wired, with the lights and the switches. Back in those days, if I remember, I sold it in 2006, but earlier before that, the thought of having working MFDs, I think, was still, something that couldn't be done without crippling your system. So didn't have any working MFDs or gauges or anything. It was basically just a big tub that looked like an F-16 that manipulated keyboard strokes. So, you know, that would be my major real cockpit, but that was, I guess, my third generation. And now, of course, I have this one, my fourth generation. When I started this project, probably about 5 years ago, I was getting close to 50. I'm 49 now, so midlife crisis, I guess. But I kind of said, okay, you know what? I've been playing Falcon 4 now since 1998. Still do, and I probably will for another 20 years or until I die, for that matter. And it's kind of a huge hobby of mine. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to build another simulator, because now that technology exists where, doing my research, I realized you didn't need a keyboard or mouse in the pit at all. You could have a complete 100% full operational cockpit. So that's what I was going to do. Believe it or not, I started out with a $5,000 budget. I exceeded that by at least $60,000 by now. But that was all by accident. My plan was just to build another wooden cockpit based off Jason stencils. And I was going to get all real switches, because I had a few of those that I swapped out in my last cockpit, and really noticed a difference between the whole tactile feel of a real mil-spec switch compared to a cheap, dollar switch you buy off eBay, right? It just kind of made the difference. And so I started collecting some parts and got my hands on a real panel, and it just went all downhill or uphill depending on you look at it from there. And I just kind of crossed that line where there's no point cheaping out at this point. So yeah, I spent a lot of money, but nonetheless, I am extremely proud of this project. It is amazing to fly. It is all one-to-one scale, exact dimensions. I mean, I know this because I'm interfacing a simulator that was made by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, replica parts that are made by this German engineer who had interfaced them with the real jet and mixing them with real parts, and everything just fits beautifully. So I'm pretty convinced this cockpit is exact scale and dimensions of the real deal, give or take a few screw holes that had to be moved, adjusted, to get parts in. Okay, so we're going to get started with the cockpit. Ever since I saw a private citizen, if you will, take home one of these F-16 Familiarization Trainers, or FAM trainers, they call them, I was blown away. I've always wanted one. I just thought it was so cool. Not only because it's obviously a pretty cool sim, but to have something with that history, that simulator that probably had thousands of pilots sit in it and learn their procedures or do whatever that they were used for. I wanted one, right? So, but never believed I'd ever own one. I did see one come up on, I think it's actually still there, on flighthelmets.com, but they wanted some ridiculous price of 13 grand for it. And the one I got was actually in better shape. So long story short, one came up on Viper Pits by an old fella in the States, fantastic guy, and he wanted $4,000 for it. So I hit him up on that right away. I just bought that up. I'm very thankful for him, because he did tell me in our conversations that he had a fellow contact him from the States who was only maybe an hour away, and all I had to do was drive there and pick it up and be gone with it. Would have made the logistics for him extremely easy, but he kept to his word. He already agreed to sell it to me. So that was a bit of workload, because we had to get it crated, we had to get it shipped and do all the export paperwork and all that. But nonetheless, it showed up, and I just could not believe when that garage door opened at the shipping company, and here I saw this simulator sitting up on a forklift, and it was just absolutely blew my mind. I finally had one. Okay, so here we are. This is an F-16 Familiarization Trainer, or a FAM trainer. You can see here with the serial number that it was built in 1985 with a number of 0045, which would lead me to believe it was the 45th one that came off the line. I was told this was originally a Block 15 or maybe a 25, so an A model for that matter, and the person who owned it before me did some minor conversions to make it a C model. When I received it, it had the side consoles, the auxiliary consoles, and a throttle. I guess, you know, when they design these, they don't put a lot of detail into the consoles because they're just meant to basically, you know, help the pilot orientate him or herself with the layout. So I had already purchased a bunch of consoles, auxiliary consoles, center pedestal, and instrument panel from a German engineer that are made exact replica. So I wanted to use those. So naturally, when I received it, the first thing I did was I stripped out the entire inside. I tore all the consoles out, the auxiliary consoles that were in there, the throttle, kind of got rid of everything and started over from scratch. The only modifications that I did to it were on the bottom of the platform, I guess because, you know, these things are kind of big and heavy, that they used just a forklift to move them around, and they had these rails underneath to guide the forks, and I must have, you know, scratched, cut my feet several times. So I finally got a drill and got rid of those and just kind of cleaned it up, so the platform looks much better now in my opinion. When I received the cockpit, it was kind of painted like an automobile. It was a very glossy, smooth white surface, very, very hard surface. And I thought that was going to be a bit of a nightmare because I was thinking I was going to have to sand it down and paint it a nice flat gray to make it look like, you know, a real jet or a simulator. That ended up being a good thing because when I wanted to do the painting, I wanted to do some sort of weathering on it. You know, I really like the beat up look, as you can see here. I leave all the wear marks, the scratches on the panels. I didn't touch anything up. I kind of like the old, you know, the old beat up, worn look, you know. So naturally I wanted weathering paint job. So I'd looked at a few artists, a few model builders that could have done that and thought that might have been a problem. Then I came up with the idea about wrapping it. I have a buddy of mine that does a lot of wraps for monster trucks and race cars, and he does lots of weathering, and he's a quite talented artist. So I approached him with the idea. And our original plan was to, you know, what I wanted to do was get actual photographs of the real jet and just basically make a big decal out of it. So I would have been putting the entire 1:1 scale image on the side of the cockpit. However, the people who were able to do that for me, it was either a language barrier or didn't understand, but you know, anyways, long story short, I wasn't able to really convey that message or kind of get that. So he ended up doing it all from scratch. So I gave him a series of photos and colors and designs, and he basically did all this from scratch. As you can see, he did a fantastic job. Show you some of the detail here. He's got like fake panels in there. He even has some, not sure how well you can see that, but even has some weathering in the screws, some oil stains, all sorts of stuff. And that was all done by hand. And I just think it turned out fantastic. The only issue that we did here is some of the markings are not really to scale, if you will, because in the real jet, this panel here, he really wanted to put panels in there to make it look kind of real. That panel would really be way back behind the seat, and really this should be all just plain. So we kind of did some compromising with the scaling and brought some images and markings forward just to kind of make it, you know, make it represent a jet. So when we were deciding on a serial number to put on the side here, I wanted to keep it consistent with the serial plate on the back. So I started doing some research on tail number 45, and I checked on f16.net and realized that the Greeks actually had received a Block 50 in the 347th Squadron, tail number 45, and thought that was pretty coincidental. But the only problem is I wanted to keep the year that this was built to 85 consistent with on the side here, so I had to make a bit of a compromise there, because in reality they would have received, I think they received their Block 50s in maybe 1997 or something, so little inconsistency there, but it keeps it consistent with the rest of the cockpit. And this is the front nose part. I currently don't have it on right now because it provides better ventilation up front. and you don't really see it, so I just have that all stored away for now. But these pieces are really great. Put in these quarter turn fasteners, so it makes it really easy to get it off and on if I'm ever transporting it. And then of course I have the tail marking from the 347th put on the nose. So that was a really nice touch. So in the original cockpit, they had these two holes here, one on each side, and then there was a triangle one right here. And my understanding is from photos that it was some sort of console board that the instructor or other pilot would put up there. So I kind of did something similar. I just wanted the mouse and keyboard stand. I'm still going to paint this black, probably get it powder coated and put a little rubber mat on it. But basically that's all this is. It's just to hold my mouse and keyboard while they're setting things up, and I can easily pull it out and shift it over to the side if I want to, or completely take it off if I kind of don't like the look of it. So looking down here, this was a main electrical panel that they had. I tore that out, 3D printed this fuse panel. So this basically is all my fuses if I need to change them. All my gauges and panels are all individually fused. I tried to make this kind of like self-contained as much as I could. So I didn't want any external computers or wiring or anything like that. So I kept everything, it's quite large inside there underneath the consoles and the front nose. So really all I have coming out of this, besides the monitor cables coming out the front for the projectors, is I have all this back here. This is the main power right here. So it kind of comes off this big little pluggy thing here. I'm not sure what that is actually used for, but I was just looking through industrial electrical supplies and came across this and thought that'd be a great idea to give it that industrial look. This is my main power. This is my computer power switch. This is a secondary power switch that I use for other electronics. And this all has to be done in a series to make it work right. And then of course I got a Cat5 cable that comes out here. So when I roll it up, I just plug in these basically two things and she's good to go. Back here, I'm still kind of working on some cable management, but this is my FSX dual amp that I have here, and it's just some little USB thing. Eventually, I like to clean all that up, have an extra USB port back here, but that's about the only kind of messy part of this cockpit that I have right now. So this back panel here, I'm not sure what it was for. By the look on the inside, it had two little shelves or something, so maybe that's where they kept their cables or something. But this panel right here has two, if I can get this in while holding the camera there, it has two quarter turn fasteners, and this is where I store my oxygen bottle. So it's just a big scuba tank that runs to my oxygen regulator inside, but basically that's what I use as a compartment to hold that. The platform here originally had grip tape on it. When I got it, it was just all torn off and painted yellow and pretty slick. So I stuck some grip tape on top and then found some nifty yellow and black grip tape as well and put that on the sides, kind of make it look industrial. This grip tape's a little bit of pain in the butt. In the summertime, I'm walking around this a lot with my shorts and just scratching up my ankles, but still looks pretty cool. So that will conclude the cockpit portion, part one. Stay tuned and check for the next parts. We'll talk about the rest of the build. Again, if you like this stuff, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll catch you next time.